The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Thursday, January 11th, 2017. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, I'd like to thank our patrons for supporting and making the show possible. You can become a patron by going to www.patreon.com/thebpd show. Let's get into the news. I'm not sure where I want to start, but let's take a look at this. There's a graphic and a headline that I want to read to you. Donald Trump speaks at a fourth grade level, according to a new analysis. Now, this isn't shocking, this isn't surprising, but it is worth bringing up on your screen. Trump speaks at a fourth grade level, lowest of last 15 U.S. presidents, according to a new analysis. And I just want to zoom in on the graphic itself so that you can see where he stands in comparison to the rest of the previous presidents. Truman ranks better. Bush, HW ranks better than him. Bush W, which is a surprise. George W. Bush actually spoke better than his father and spoke better, obviously, than Trump. FDR, Lyndon B. Johnson, Reagan, Kennedy is up there. Obama, of course, is going to be at the 9.7 level, at ninth grade level. Carter, I wouldn't have suspected that of Carter, 10.7, and Hoover at 11.3. Donald Trump is at a fourth grade. He's almost at fifth grade. I mean, you got to give him that. He's almost at the fifth grade speaking level. This is an advantage as well as a disadvantage, right? This is something that's laughable, but it's also something that plays well, right? There's an intentional effort to dumb down society and to take pleasure in a level of ignorance, right? And to disdain intellectual elites. I think in television, they say that, or with a book, you want to write it at a third grade level so more people can read it and consume it. But that's from the entertainment side of society that likes to play to the audience and play down to the audience versus trying to elevate the audience. So, and while we're laughing about it, and I'm not really laughing about it so much, actually I am. While we're laughing about the fact that Donald Trump speaks at a fourth grade reading level, or speaking level rather, it's actually to his advantage. People will describe this as he's plain spoken, or he's not, he's one of us. He's one of us, and which is hilarious because in no way imaginable is Donald Trump one of them, one of those people. See, Donald Trump is rich. You could be rich and be an idiot and still be successful in life. That's a given. I think everybody knows that. I mean, people just have money and they have the ability to have money and be ignorant, and that money covers up all the ignorance. And so what's the irony of this is that the people who like the fact that Donald Trump speaks like this, or the people who find that, who consider this to be a virtue, they don't have the same advantage that he does in that they're broke. You can't be ignorant and broke. If you're ignorant and broke, I won't even say good luck. You're ass out. You're straight out of luck if you're ignorant and broke. Right. So Donald Trump speaking plainly to his constituents is the greatest irony because they will never get anywhere if they speak and carry themselves like Donald Trump does. Donald Trump obviously ascended to the presidency by virtue of his money, the money that he inherited. You can be ignorant and be rich and go a very long way. That's the moral of the story. But I found it really amazing that I was fascinated that George W. Bush, who to me spoke like an oath, I would have thought that George W. was at the same level as Trump. Maybe a little bit better than Trump, maybe. I would like to know what all of their reading levels are. I would venture to say that Donald Trump's reading level and his reading comprehension level is just as low as his speaking ability. But again, what we see as a vice, Republicans see as a virtue. So they will see the same exact headline and they're going to promote it and say, see, he's just an average Joe. He's just an average blue collar billionaire who can afford to speak like a child because, well, like I said, his money affords him that opportunity. Our phone lines are open today. We worked out all the tech issues that we were having. You could call in 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on any of the discussions. A lot of things happening in the news, so I'm just going to knock them down one by one. There were the real MVP, a hero of mine, New Zealand. I thought when I read the article, when I read the headline initially, I thought that this happened in the United States. I'm saddened to inform us that this did not happen in the United States. So in New Zealand, someone hijacked the radio frequencies of all the police, and they streamed or they played through the radio system. All of the police in New Zealand, they played F the Police by NWA. The real, like I said, they are the real MVP. Now, this is being reported by The Independent, and they broadcast. Just want to read a piece of it. Officers in New Zealand have been forced to repeatedly listen to NWA's F the Police by a person illegally broadcasting the song on their frequency. Police radios have picked up at least two versions of the 1988 hit, which protested against police brutality, racial profiling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Inspector Kevin Lloyd told the Otago Daily Times that people had been put in danger by the broadcast after the song interfered with armed police trying to coordinate their response to a man pointing a gun at a motorist. I get it. Okay, it was dangerous, but can we just give this? This is expert level trolling. I wish that it happened in the United States. Matter of fact, I think I said on the show that it did happen in the United States, which is why I want to clear it up here and say that it actually happened in New Zealand. I don't really feel a great need to add context to why this person is the real MVP. I think we all know. If you watched any news over the last, I don't know, since you've been born, you will understand exactly why the person who did this is the real MVP. No one was harmed in the issue. You know, the armed motorist situation was resolved, and this person, who is still anonymous, is the real MVP. Especially, did you guys see the video? I think I have it. I think I can play it for you. But did you see the video of the police officer at the school board meeting in Louisiana arresting a teacher? Let me see if I have that video. I want to see if I have that video, because I think I saw that video first and then I saw the article immediately after, saying that someone had hijacked the radio frequencies of police officers and streamed "Fuck the Police" by NWA. I think I saw that immediately afterwards, and it's just apropos. It just makes police officers in the United States, are there good ones? I'll let you debate that. But I will say this, that there are too many who take advantage of their authority and they abuse that authority and abuse citizens, and this is how we get to where we are. Let's see if this is the right video.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
So he's arresting her. Unfortunately, I don't have audio on this. He's arresting her, and at this moment, she's screaming, or he's saying, stop resisting. Stop resisting. And the irony of it is we can all see with our eyes, our own eyes, that this woman was not resisting. She fell to the ground, got up, he capped her, and that was that. But he yelled, stop resisting. Now, a couple of important things here, right? This is not ye old standard abuse because it's a black officer abusing a white woman. Not something that you see on a regular basis. But like I always, that's a little interference. Like I've always said, what I've always said is that if there is a police state, it started first in the black community. And if there is a police state, it's going to spill over into other communities. And we've also talked about the fact that police brutality is not something that's only endemic with white officers or non-black officers. We've said that police brutality transcends race. Right. And we've seen black officers. There's another case in Louisiana where 2 black officers, one was sentenced to 40 years for the murder of a 6-year-old white boy, shooting up the father's truck, trying to get the father, inadvertently kill the son. So, I mean, this entire idea that it is limited to white officers or non-black officers has always been fallacious. Right. And we've said this, that once a person joins the police force, they're trained, they're indoctrinated with that culture, and that culture supersedes any loyalty to any race, or, you know, if that even is a thing with black people. It transcends it because that becomes their life. That becomes their training. That becomes their profession. It's no longer, they're no longer view themselves. In so many cases, they don't view themselves as a part of the community. If you take a look at what happened in St. Louis when the police officers were rallying, and I forgot exactly what the incident was, but it was the most recent incident in St. Louis, possibly because of the acquittal of a police officer for killing a black man. I remember that detail. But in the video, you can hear them yelling, whose streets? Our streets, right? And these are police officers shouting this together. Whose streets? Our streets. So that lets you know that immediately they have an attitude of them versus us. And it doesn't matter. There's going to be black people and there's going to be Hispanic officers. There's going to be all sorts of officers who are indoctrinated with that type of thinking. And the truth of the matter is that it honestly transcends race, and it supersedes their commitment, if any, to their own race. Period. And so this is how we see the video that we just saw, the video of the black officer accosting this white teacher. And it is both signifies the reality that, one, blue lives and that concept of the blue wall of silence and the blue police officer culture transcends race. But then, two, we've been saying it for a long time. If you see police brutality and police violence, it will always, if you see it in the black community, it's always going to spill over. There's another facet to this conversation. And unfortunately, I don't have the, let me try to play one more clip and see if this one has audio. No, we don't want that one. The other part of this is the case in Louisiana with the teacher being arrested. The backdrop of the story is that she was asking the school board questions about a raise that they were giving to the superintendent. Superintendent was getting a $30,000 raise. She was complaining about the fact that teachers don't make enough and that the support staff doesn't make enough. She was asking a question. You can watch the full video, and she was escorted out and eventually arrested for essentially asking a question. Now, the ACLU has taken up the case. What's significant about this is that this is probably one of the best examples of a government group, a government agency, or elected officials suppressing criticism from a citizen. And they're doing it. Of course, their justification is going to be that they are, rules and policies and decorum that they have to show. And this is interesting when you allow decorum and your rules and policies to become the tool that you use to suppress political speech. They're not stupid, right? This is not entry-level government and politics. What's that high school course? This is not your government and economics course where people are learning for the first time. No, they're very keen. They understand that they can create a system where they can essentially suppress the voices of the people through asserting policies on decorum, when you can speak, when you can't speak. It's very similar to the having to get permits to protest. Very similar to that. And if you don't have a permit to protest, then you get arrested. Well, in its own way, that is an infringement on our First Amendment rights to free speech, the right to assembly. But they have very strong policies and procedures and protocols to insist that if you are going to protest your government, it has to be within the confines of something that they're comfortable with. I'm finally getting to my point. So the government has always, and very intentionally in the later years, they've always structured your protest and your dissent and your criticism. They've always structured the manner in which you can deliver that in a way that's palatable to them. And so long as it's palatable to them, it's not really threatening to them. And it doesn't really challenge them. This is the perfect case of how the government can give you the illusion of free speech when in reality you have confined speech. And the speech is perfectly confined to the parameters that are non-threatening to that government. The ACLU has taken up the case, and I don't know if the case is going to go into the broader question of the restrictions that the government can place on your speech and on your protest under the guise of protocol, under the guise of decorum, under the guise of rules and regulations of order. I don't know if it's going to go into that bigger question, but that is the bigger question underneath this case in Louisiana where the teacher was arrested. The bigger question underneath it is, to what extent does the government have the right to confine your speech? And I'm sure there's plenty of case studies. I mean, the challenge has probably been made if we dig into the legal history around it. I'm sure there's plenty of cases that has outlined the fact that the United States government does have the right to do this. But it's granted itself that right. Ultimately, it's granted itself that right. And so all of our protests, all of our dissent, even raising our hand and asking a question at a school board has become a means of control. We talk about controlled opposition. The majority of our dissent is controlled dissent. The majority of our protests are controlled protests. It's nothing more than an outlet to give us space and say, let them go over there on that block. Here's their permit, and let them shout to the top of their lungs. We're comfortable with that. Nothing's really going to change. That's really the structure. Think about every protest. And if you dare have a protest that is not permitted, that you didn't get a permit for, then you're going to get arrested. In the bigger scheme of things, if we go up to another level, if we go up to the 30,000-foot level, the big picture is that there's really no amount of protest that the United States government is not able to absorb and co-opt into its structure, into its system, into its and I want to re-say the word system so that I can put emphasis on it's systematic. It is the structure. It is perfectly within the acceptable operating parameters of our government to have loud and boisterous protests that are confined in the manner that is permissible by the government, confined by a manner that is permissible by the government. And I know this is just one microcosm of this, but if you just think about, the teacher in the Louisiana, there's just one small detail in a data point in so many examples of this. But think about what we're encouraging in Iran, right? We're encouraging the protest against not the Mujahideen, I'm in Afghanistan now, but against the supreme leader, Al-Khamenei. In actuality, we're supporting the protest against the entire regime, against everything that has happened since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, right? We're supporting that. And we're supporting it to the point that we want to see those protesters. When I say we, I'm talking about the United States government, the American regime. We want to see those protesters eventually turn into a revolution and overthrow the supreme leader and the theocratic government of Iran, the Iranian Republic. Think about that. That's what we encourage abroad. We encourage the Arab Spring. We encouraged the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. We encourage the protesters in Syria. We encourage all of these protesters whose protests are unconfined, right? Uncontrolled, because it's in the region, and stick with me on here. In the region, protest is. In the Middle East region, protest is something that's already dangerous, already frowned upon, something that could already cost you your freedom. There's no express guarantee or right to protest there. And so any type of protest becomes a threat to that government. America realizes this. America already knows this. And so they say, okay, instead of us suppressing protests, let's co-opt all protests and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to say what's on their mind. Let them vent. Let them go into the streets within this area that we're going to permit, and let them protest. Because if we don't let them protest, then they will protest outside of the parameters that are acceptable to us. I really didn't mean to spend this much time on this, but this is actually something that I've thought about in the back of my mind for a long time. And I think this one little example in Louisiana perfectly exemplifies what America does to the spirit of protest and why there will almost never be another revolution in the United States, even a political one, not a violent one, but a political one, because it is perfectly structured to co-opt everything that we want to do. Even my goddamn broadcast, right? Before I finish, I am going to go back and express the hypocrisy of what's happening with America encouraging protest and revolution in Iran, but we won't do it here. But it reminds me of the episode of Black Mirror, 13 million credits, where the young black guy who's now in the British black guy who's now playing a role in Black Panther, he lost it. He literally lost it, and he was getting ready to take his own life on whatever streaming, international streaming. They had a single broadcasting system that broadcasted to everyone. So everyone that was locked in the system and they had to view this guy's video. And as he lost it and he started to protest, and he was getting ready to protest by killing himself, the system got smart, or smarter. And they immediately, on the spot, began to applaud him. They applauded him. Everything that he said, they applauded him. And he didn't know how to react. He had the shiv right next to his throat. He didn't know how to react because he thought that he was going to have to kill himself for real. He thought that this was a genuine, legitimate protest. He was going to protest with his own life. The system immediately co-opted him, started clapping, and they gave him his own show. And so every night for the rest of he was rich, successful, and every night he would broadcast with the knife to his throat. That's exactly what the United States of America has done with protest. Even with my show, all of us are part of a controlled resistance because we're operating in the acceptable parameters that the government has already approved. I'm not saying anything other than just to think about it like that. All right. 857-600-0518. if you want to weigh in. Take a look at some conversations in the chat room. I see some folks coming over from the 4 o'clock show. How's it going? Orion, God Emperor, ever so humble. Good to see you all here. Quite a few people here from the afternoon show. Always love to have you here. Let's go one more. I don't know if I can toggle back. Let's see if I can toggle back. There we go. I want you to watch this video. There should be audio on this next video of a Kansas Republican. Take a listen in.
What you really need to do is go back in the 30s and where they outlawed all types of drugs in Kansas across the United States. What was the reason why they did that? One of the reasons why, I hate to say it, it's the African Americans. They were basically users, and they basically responded the worst of all those drugs just because their character makeup, their genetics and that.
That video is crazy to me. It's very difficult to hear, but this is a Republican, Kansas Republican, who is explaining his opposition to legalizing marijuana. And in his explanation to legalize marijuana, he said that the reason that he opposes it is because African Americans, if you go back and look in the 30s, African Americans, they react weird. They react to it. He said their genetics. It's really, he said the African Americans, they were basically users, and they basically responded the worst off to those drugs just because of their character makeup, their genetics, and that stuff. I actually have to pause to laugh about that because I had a chance to talk about this on the afternoon show, I think about 2 days ago. And I wanted to talk about this yesterday with you, but I didn't get a chance to because we ran out of time. But there is a baseline level of bigotry against African Americans, people of color in general, but specifically African Americans, that is accepted as truth by some elected officials. I'm not even concerned about the average American at this point. I'm concerned about the people who are in positions of power. People who are in positions of power and have the ability to affect our lives, they carry some bigotry with them that is older than them. This guy was referencing propaganda from the 1930s, where it basically laid at the feet of all African Americans the problem of marijuana. They were creating a problem of marijuana because, as we now know, marijuana is not addictive. Marijuana is not, I don't even have to list the things, but it was an intentional propaganda campaign launched in the 1930s that this Kansas Republican state representative was speaking about. Now, he's resigned from his chairmanships in the state party, in the state house, but he has not resigned from his position. He's not resigned from his office. And he's pulling up this old propaganda that is so deeply rooted in him that he could, off the top of his head, refer to the exact year that this propaganda campaign began. I talked about Harry J. Anslinger, who was the first chairman of the Bureau of Narcotics in the Treasury Department. And this is the campaign that he started in the 1930s, literally saying some of the same things that this guy said just a few weeks ago. The problem is that we somewhere between, 1964 and today, somewhere between those 2 points, I think we forgot how deeply rooted this problem of bigotry and racism is with a lot of conservative white Americans. Don't get me wrong, there's racism in liberal America. We'll address that when the story comes that's appropriate for me to address it. But right now, think of how deeply rooted this had to be in this man to hold on to this and to bring it up off the top of his head. I mean, for this to be a drop of the dime talking point to reference the exact year that this propaganda campaign began in 1930. This is something that he has ruminated over for a very long time. This means this is a deeply held belief. And somewhere along the way, we forgot how deeply rooted this racism is in the United States of America. We see the symptoms of it. We talk about the symptoms all the time. We see the backlash from police officers. We see, the backlash from white voters. We see the police abuse by police officers. We see, the movement Black Lives Matter came out as a result. We see the symptoms, but did we really ever consider or protest or address how deeply rooted this stuff really is? Here's another example of how I know we kind of lost track of how deeply rooted this is that majority of our elected officials now who are between the ages of 60 and 80, they were alive and well during Jim Crow. They were alive and well before the 1964-1965 Voting Rights Act and Voting Civil Rights Act. They were alive and well. And so they were born into and groomed and raised in a system of Jim Crow and white supremacy. And yet we're surprised or taken aback or just neglected to address the fact that most of our elected officials who are in the in Congress and Senate on the federal level and they're in their House and the Senate seats on the state level, most of them, if you're over the age of 60, you were alive and well. Think about the president. He's 70 years old. He was alive. He was alive and groomed before, 72? Yeah, before Brown versus Board of Education. What was he born in by? He had to be born in 42, 43, or actually, I'm sorry, 44 or 45. So they grew up in this time, indoctrinated in this time. And so at what point, we really have to question, what point did they have a change of heart? A change of mind, a change. When did they come across the aisle and come from the side of opposition to the voting rights and the Civil Rights Act? Because, I'm sorry, if you were in your teens or if you were in your 20s when the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were passed, that means you had an opinion. That means that you had an opinion that you probably inherited from your parents. So at what point did they grow out of that hatred and that bigotry? That's the question. And I don't think that we've ever taken the time to pause and answer that question or even pose that question to the people like the man in the video I just played. Because he referenced a piece of propaganda that is so old and so deeply rooted in America that we're still trying to dispel those notions today, some 80 years later. He referenced that propaganda like it was yesterday, like it was a matter of fact, like it was a statement of fact of relevance today. And it just makes me beg the question, when did they ever let go of that racism? Or did they just simply say, okay, we can't be outwardly racist? Of course, the clear answer everyone is going to say is B, right? Option B that I just gave you. But these are our elected officials. Let's just do an experiment. Let's do an experiment. Let's see how old Mitch McConnell is. Let's see what year he was born. And we can tell you everything that happened before. He's 75 years old. He was born in 1942, before Brown versus the Board of Education, which means he was in school when schools started to be integrated. And you have to ask the question, what were his parents like? What were they indoctrinating him with? Because at that time, it's such a critical time in American history, such a polarized time in American history where you had elementary school students who were virulent about their racism. And I'm sorry, I am not saying that people can't change over time, But I'm saying, I think we forget how old our leaders are and where they grew up, more specifically, when they grew up. So in 1942, he was born, which means in 1964, he was 22 years old. Just checking my man. 1964, he was 22 years old. He had a fully formed worldview and ideology. At that point, he thought he knew it all. The question is, what did he think in 1964 and 1965? Let's check somebody else. Paul Ryan would be too young. Paul Ryan would be one of the few leaders, but let's not take that for granted. Let's see what year he was born. Probably in the 70s, right? Yeah, he was born in 1970. So he's exempt from this analysis with few exceptions. But think about all the leaders who are over the age of 65, who are still serving in power. Joe Arpaio's 85. Shit, I mean, he's 85 running for the Senate. I mean, legitimately was a part of the Jim Crow era. I think we really forget exactly how deeply rooted these ideologies can be and why it's so simple for elected officials to hearken back to propaganda that is to us ancient, but to them, it was relevant in the formation of their youth. Actually, that was a pretty good segment, if I have to say so myself. All right, one more video, and then we got to get out of here. Let me shift over here to camera 4. I want to play this video from. Let's see. Let's get this out of the way. We'll cover Medicaid tomorrow. I want to minimize this. I want to play this video from Fox Business. This video from Fox Business is of Stuart Varney, and he's having a conversation about minimum wage with waiters and servers in general, waitresses and servers. And this is what he said about if they raise the minimum wage for servers. Oh, great. So, I know why I don't have audio. Let's start here. This is what happens when you're a one-man show. Okay, let's play it again. This is Stuart Varney, and this is what he had to say about what he would do if they raise the minimum wage. Listen in.
The people who are the recipients of this increase don't like it because they all feel that their job security has now been tampered with.
Yeah. Do tips go down?
No, because it doesn't affect tips. It's all on the employer, the $15.
Yeah, but if I walk into a restaurant and I know that the waiter or waitress is making $15 an hour, way more than they used to make the previous year, and I'm going to think, wait a minute, are you going to give me, am I going to give you 20%, 15%,
right.
10% or whatever?
Stuart, we haven't seen that as of yet. Okay. It's an interesting observation.
That's not an interesting observation. That is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. So Stuart Varney, who's a millionaire, right? He's a millionaire hired by billionaires to convince poor people and middle class people that they should not think about their best economic interests. Let's be sure about what the structure of Fox News actually is and what they do in media, right? So Stuart Varney, this millionaire, he's sitting here and he's looking at America, and he's looking at this guy, this expert, and he's saying that if he finds out that workers, if he walks into a restaurant and he finds out that that worker has gotten a raise to $15 an hour, he's no longer going to tip. Now, before I go too far against him, let's think about what happens with tips in the first place. And weirdly enough, I may end up on the same side of Stuart Varney, but for the exact opposite reason, right? Tips are nothing more than a way to extract more wealth from the rest of us so that the owner of the restaurant doesn't have to pay their workers. Let's be sure about that. Because tipping, you're tipping waiters who are making $2 an hour, $3 an hour. And this has been something that the restaurant industry and the restaurant lobbyists have been virulent about. They've defended this. They've created this entire system where the expectation in society is not that the company has to pay the server, but that the people have to pay more than their food, the price that they pay for their food and their drinks, they have to pay above and beyond that in order to give this worker a livable wage. So tipping, in the sense of how it's structured within our capitalist system, is a scam. It is just shifting the burden of having it. It's like if I won't give you that example. I'll keep that example for myself. But it's shifting the responsibility from the owner of the company, the owner of the company who's making billions of dollars, right? The entity itself, the corporation, is shifting the responsibility from TGI Fridays from having to pay livable wages to their employees. All they have to do is to enjoy their profits. It's shifting that responsibility from the corporation to the average person that comes and eats in their restaurant. So I would always advocate for giving them livable wages, boom, be done. Because it's just another scam. It's just another scam of taking more money from the rest of us. Until such point, I will always continue to tip. Stuart Varney, on the other hand, is saying, look at these people. They're making too much money. $15 an hour is far too much money for these entry-level positions. They don't need that, so I'm not going to tip them. The motivation behind what he's saying is another form of class warfare. More specifically, he's trying desperately to find a way to keep the minimum wage from being raised. And so he's using tips as a way of taking them hostage and saying, if you raise tips, then maybe if you raise wages, then maybe people won't tip. How about we raise wages so people don't have to tip, so you don't have to take more money from working class and middle class Americans, and so that the responsibility of giving an employee a livable wage belongs where it should belong, which is with the CEO and the corporation that runs that company and profits off that company. But the motivation behind Stuart Varney's little spiel is really trying to keep people in their places, trying to keep workers who he feels are beneath him in their places, because you do not deserve to make $15 an hour. And if you make $15 an hour, then you don't deserve your tip. I guarantee you, if we raise minimum wage workers or servers, if we raise their wages to $15 an hour, most people will continue to tip just out of custom. But that's not the point here, not for Stuart Varney. The point for Stuart Varney is to say, how can we keep this move from going from $2 an hour to an actual livable wage? How do we do that? Let's throw something else in the water and say, oh, you're going to lose your tips. But I'm almost certain the majority of servers around the country would love to get an increase on average than to get a sporadic great tip every now and then. So if you ask the people, this is a threat. This is an empty threat. If you ask servers, they will laugh at this. He shouldn't ask servers. Stuart Varney shouldn't ask servers, first of all, because if he goes in public after many people see this video, I don't know that he actually should go and eat in public again, because servers have a way. They have their way of getting back at shitty people like Stuart Varney. But if you ask servers, I'm pretty sure they would say, fair deal. Let's go. Keep your tips and give me $15 an hour so I can live. And you know what? We as the people should say the same thing. Let us keep our tips, because we should not have to pay for something that capitalists should be paying for. You're making a profit off these people. Give them enough money to live. Absolutely. Give them enough money to live. A person that works 40 hours a week should be able to live.
Are you open to
857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. I think I have a caller here. We're getting ready to, and I don't have a mouse. All right, I'm going to try to take this caller. Caller, you are live on the air. Hold that thought. Let's do this. All right, caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hello, my name is Adrian, and I just wanted to ask your opinion. There's something I'm trying to promote. Basically, one of the problems that progressives have is that they go in a prime.
I lost you there, Adrian. I thought it was getting ready to be good. Are you there, Adrian? Caller. Okay. Unfortunately, We've lost a caller. I don't know if he lost his signal or what happened. All right. So in the meantime, that's all the time we have for you today. Let's be back here tomorrow. Again, I have Friday shows now, Monday through Friday. So we'll be back tomorrow with a regular broadcast. Go to patreon.com, become a patron today, and patreon.com/the BPD show to become a patron today. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.